Hey, this is Moses the Mentor, and in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the pros and cons of having Section 8 tenants. So sit back, learn, grow, and pay it forward. Let's go. All right, the first pro is guaranteed rent payments. And one of the worst parts of being a rental property investor is when you rent a place out in that anticipation of whether or not someone is going to pay their rent on time. So for me, I love the security of knowing that a large percentage to up to 100% of the rent is covered by the local housing authority. So for me, I love guaranteed rent. So this is definitely my number one pro for Section 8 tenants. The second pro is that you're going to have lower vacancy rates. And what I mean by that is that Section 8 tenants typically stay longer than cash paying tenants. And it makes perfect sense. A cash paying tenant is going to be one that's going to constantly assess their finances every time it's renewal time. They're going to say, well, man, should I re-up? Should I start looking for a home to buy? Should I look for nicer things? Whatever the case may be. But with a Section 8 tenant, you're going to be able to give someone a quality home who probably couldn't afford this place on their own. So they're more in line to stay and be more appreciative of the place. So that's another reason why I enjoy renting out to Section 8 tenants, because they will stay longer, and that's what I want. So let's talk about the cons here. The first thing that comes to mind, number one, is the paperwork. The paperwork is extensive, and again, it might vary by housing authority, but I can tell you directly that working with a couple myself, that you're going to have to go through a lot of paperwork. So what my best practice is that once you know what successful documentation looks like, to just use that as a template going forward. And unfortunately, I've done that, and then depending on whatever processor is working your case, they still will kick it back. So just prepare yourself that you're going to have a lot of paperwork. You're going to have to share a lot of documentation to make sure things go through. The second con is that it might take some time for you to get that tenant secured and placed. So anywhere from 30 to 60 days is probably the standard here. So just keep that in mind. So if you do have a vacancy and you need the rent right away, obviously it's going to be a whole lot quicker if you go with a cash tenant, because a cash tenant will have cash on hand. They can go ahead and secure the place with prorated rent, security deposit. When you're dealing with Section 8, it's a process, and the process makes sense because you're working with the government and they have to make sure that you're not a slumlord. They have to do a lot of different inspection things on the back end, things like making sure you're up to date on taxes, all that type of stuff. So they have to do their due diligence before they enter into an agreement with you, but that is going to be a con. So depending on your situation, if you need the rent immediately to cover your mortgage or something like that, having a Section 8 tenant might not be the best route for you. The next con is the inspection process. And I kind of juggled on whether or not to include this as a con, because realistically, understanding what's going on with your property is a good thing, because then you can go ahead and take care of it before it turns into bigger issues. The problem is that you, as a rental property investor, I want to make sure that you guys understand that it really will depend on the inspector on what will be identified and what not. So you have to be prepared for every inspection, that you might have someone that's really nitpicky, or you might have someone that's pretty much kind of lax about it. So it's one of those things that you have to just be prepared for. I've had times where I've had an inspection and I couldn't believe that it passed. I'm like, okay, I know for sure we're going to have to address that. Then I've had times where I did a full renovation and the place is brand spanking new, and they'll point out petty things like, it just can be across the board all over the place. So I would say have low expectations for inspections. Don't over renovate because they might bring some stuff up that you wouldn't even have thought about. So just keep an open mind during the inspection process and you'll be fine. The last con of having Section 8 tenants is a little weird to me. I'm trying to make sense of it, but I do want to point it out for those who are interested in having Section 8 tenants. What I've found is that Section 8 tenants are a whole lot less maintenance. They typically don't reach out as much for certain items. Now you might say, whew, I can sleep good at night. But honestly, I've uncovered some things in my rental property career that I really truly wish that my Section 8 tenants would have pointed out. I know they did it because they just didn't want to be a bother to me, and I appreciate that. But I think one of the things you should make sure you speak to your Section 8 tenants about is about preserving the quality of the home. You know, I use verbiage like that, like, hey, this is your home. So let me know what's going on so I can ensure it's okay. Now, within your lease, you can identify things that you won't actually cover. So if you don't want to cover pest control, you can put that in your lease. But things like, you know, like an infestation, those are things we really need to know. You know, if you start seeing an infestation in the house, I want to know about that as an owner. You know, if it's beyond your control and it's something I need to get on top of, it's very important that you let me know. So again, that's one of the cons of Section 8 tenants. It's really tough for them to secure quality housing, unfortunately. However, you know, as a result of that, they typically become pretty low maintenance and like to be no bother so that they can stay in the place. So that could be a pro, but also that can be a con. To sum it all up, Section 8 tenants are great people and they deserve quality housing. You're going to hear a lot of different stereotypes about Section 8 tenants, how they break up the home and how they're dirty and nasty. And honestly, I've never experienced that. I can tell you that the way you screen your cash tenants, you can easily screen your Section 8 tenants. There's no rule saying that you don't have to have a security deposit. There's no rule saying that you shouldn't have a certain credit score requirement. There's no rule stating that you have to have someone in your home that has a criminal record. Those are all things that you as the landlord can screen for before you extend the property to a Section 8 tenant. So don't believe the hype. I highly recommend Section 8 tenants. I think the fact that you get guaranteed rent and lower vacancy rates alone is worth the cons that you might experience. I also find a lot of value, and I feel really proud to say that I extend quality housing to people who need it the most. So it's a win-win-win. It's a win for me as an investor because I get the cash flow and guaranteed revenue. It's a win for the tenant because they have a great place to live. And it's a win for the government because ultimately we're doing a service for the government because we're providing housing for their citizens. Because otherwise they would have to do it. Or otherwise you have a bigger homelessness issue. So just keep that in mind when you're considering Section 8 tenants. I think it's an excellent opportunity for those that want to know more about it. And I just think it's a great win.